It's just literally we build a new company almost every 2 weeks. You shouldn't shape your strategy based on the org. You should do it the other way around. You should shape your org based on the strategy, because otherwise you end up in these local maximums.
Olivia Elf joined Sana 3 months before its Series A at 20 people. She then went on to build out their London office, and 5 years later, the company was acquired by Workday for over $1 billion. If you've ever been in the situation that you had the feeling your org chart no longer fits your strategy, Olivia today walks us through how the Sana team rebuilt the company every 6 months. She also tells us about the one hire she would not do again when entering a new market, and the principles she uses every week to stop the team from drifting into mediocrity. Enjoy.
If you joined the company, Christian, I would expect you to change it. That's the expectation. It's a very different framing to what are the things that we need to keep. We had never hired leaders into Sana almost. We've always hired ICs that grew into leaders.
If you would give that younger self like one advice, what would it be?
The thing we did wrong, and I wouldn't do over again, is...
This is Melanie.
And this is Christian.
You're listening to Follow the Gradient, the weekly podcast with actionable insights about how to build a business while staying sane.
So, Olivia, welcome to the show. So you joined Sana 3 months before the Series A closed. What was the company not doing back then that really surprised you?
Thank you so much, Christian. I always think back at this moment, actually, because I did interviewed for Sana now 5+ years ago, and it was a small company of around 15, 20 people back then. And I remember during my interview process, I had received a task to create a board deck. And I'd received a bunch of data, and I actually thought, and I worked through that data and so on, and I actually thought that was dummy data. And then I came into, of course, went well. I was really excited to start, and then I joined Sana, and the first thing I was about to do was then create a real board deck for the board meeting that was about to come up. And then I accessed the data, and it was actually the same data. And I realized, I remember my first thought being like, oh crap, this was not at all dummy data, it's actually a real deal. So I think that was definitely my biggest surprise coming in, how early this actually was. And I came in from McKinsey, so I hadn't ever been in touch with a company that was that early stage, except running a small company by my own. So that was the biggest surprise. But I think on the other hand, the thing that surprised me was the other side of the coin was I was surprised how little the product was ready and so on, but how defined the company already was. So you could go around and ask every single Sanian about what are the principles we build on, what's the mission, why are we doing this? And every single person would tell the same stories, and they would explain the same things and so on. And then we would ask what is the product, and you got 1,000 different answers. So I was very surprised by how extremely strong principles these early stage companies were built on, how everybody knew exactly what kind of company wanted to build, but everything else was basically chaos.
So on that second point, do you mean the company was defined in terms of its processes, or really on the vision where you want to go, and everybody knew that, and then the only thing the product kind of had to do is to catch up?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it. I would almost say that the foundation was extremely well built out, and then everything on top was sort of chaos. So it felt somehow already very tight. It felt like a company that people had already thought very hard about. What kind of company is this going to be, and so on, before any of it almost existed.
And so if you now cast forward to today, did that vision from back then, did that turn out to be the actual product you guys built, or was that then something different?
I would say so. So very similar, at least. We always had this belief that you could advance human intelligence with machine learning. I think that was always the backbone of Sana. And how that would apply to reality has changed throughout the years. But that thesis, that would be possible in the very near future, that was the excitement that I would say drove people.
Can you dive deeper there, how you guys arrived, or the company, even before you joined, arrived at that kind of specific vision? Because especially in the early stages, startups do sometimes so many different pivots because simply you go out with a hypothesis, you are proven wrong, you talk to customers, you have sales feedback, so you pivot. Was there a specific recipe you guys applied that you could nail down the vision in a way that it actually turned out to be true? And that worked out?
I wonder if the answer to that it was our vision has always been like abstract enough in a way. That is like it's too abstract to be wrong in a way. And I'm partly joking, but so I think we were all excited about that like abstract vision that we would in the near future almost live in a world where we collaborate with machines in some way. And then I think from that, we could derive a bunch of different products. And we've also pivoted multiple times. So we of course, from that derived our everything starts with learning, basically. Like if you in an organization can learn quicker than anybody else, you are likely to change the world. You can change the way that researchers discover new medicine. You can all of those things. So yeah, I think that we had that very broad overall vision that we could derive different product ideas from and then just run on it. But this was, as I said in the beginning, I think I would even literally walk around in the first few weeks in my time at Sana and ask everybody. Yeah, I actually did. I did a one-on-one with every single person when I joined Sana. We were only 20 people. And I of course asked, what are we building? What problem are we solving? And I didn't have the same answer from two people.
Now, fast forward a little bit to, I think, May 2022. You guys then, or also you made a move to London. You guys opened the UK entity and you were tasked to build out that new UK branch. So if you take us back to the first days or the first hire in London, like who was that? Why exactly that person or that role?
Yeah. I think this is almost the nature of building in a smaller European country, and that you're like, that you're gonna have to go global very soon. And that's also what we raced on, right? That we could take over the US and UK and the broader European market. So I would like to say what nobody tells you, but I think people actually told me this, but it's very hard to internalize before you've done it, is it really sucks building a new market. And I actually, even now, when I think back of it, I think of it as it was only fun, but I know it wasn't. So I think what's very hard with those first weeks and months in a new market is, and we experienced this both in US and the UK, is that you've had what you feel like a lot of traction, even if you're only like Series B, and you've had 10x that traction from earlier stages and in your home market, and everybody knows who you are, what you stand for, and what you're doing. Then you come to this new market and nobody knows you, so you have to start over. And yeah, we experienced that in the UK. So I think the most important thing there, what we try to do is to find the first people who would be able to build momentum every single day, although in reality you have none. Of course there are wins, because otherwise you're doing something wrong in that market, but in reality you don't have, maybe it will go months or even year, or let's say months before you even close a deal or so, and you don't have that energy from the headquarters and so on. So yeah, I think we've tried to find a few people who were very generalist, who would run through walls, who had fire in their eyes, and who people truly wanted to be around. And yeah, we found a few of those. Most of our first joiners in the UK market are still in the team today, which is cool. They are almost like a dictionary of the past of that market.
Can you dive deeper on this building momentum? What you mean by that? Was that something internally facing so that the team keeps on pushing, although there is not a crazy success story every single day? Was that externally to generate demand? What was that?
I would say internally is what I meant. Externally too, you will want to have people who you can put into any situation and who will make a mark, basically. But internally, it's a hard thing. You're sitting in a small room, probably in a co-working space. You're 3 or 4 or 5 people. Every day you have to come in and feel like this is the day that's going to matter for the future of this company and for this world. It's a big task to do that. So, yeah, I think what we worked with very hands-on tools to do that. Like, for example, we used a lot of whiteboarding. We didn't use CRM where people get a big list of things or accounts that they should work or whatever. We said, okay, this is the whiteboard. These are the 10 accounts or companies that we would like to get a foot in the door with. And then we just decided to run on only that. So I think you have to find things like that are momentum building enough, and that breaks down this huge thing and endeavor that you have to do into tasks that can feel feasible when you wake up in the morning, basically.
Super interesting. And I think it's a kind of a recipe or guideline for the early days of any startup, right? Because it's very similar in a sense to building a new market to building a startup. There is a lot of things in common. Yeah.
Yeah. But we also have in our company, we have a lot of things built in to build momentum. One of the first things I did when I joined Sana was to set this rhythm of the company, basically the heartbeat. So we have a rhythm that we call 6-6, which is 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks. This means that every 6 years is basically we just dream and try to make bets about the future, which is more like a fun exercise than anything else. But then on the 6 month, we set a very ambitious company strategy based on all of the beliefs and bets in the company. And we create missions around that. So we basically organize our whole company around those missions and that strategy. And this has meant that every 6 months is almost like a lifetime in itself. And we would call it something. So it becomes an era. And I think that's what's fun too. Then you can think back at that era and you can say, oh, that's when I built the UK with this person and so on. So that life doesn't just become this ongoing sort of struggle. And so I think that was one of the things that we stuck to and we did really well.
To build on that point, because I think this is super, super helpful for many companies out there. Do you start with that exercise on a company level and then so you break down what you want to achieve in 6 months or what these 6 months are about on a company level, and then each team takes it and translates that into what does it mean for me, or how do you approach that?
Yeah. So every 6 months, we actually do something we call DIBS. So it starts with data and insights. So we build the data and insights memo around the whole company. So the teams write them. We do it super unstructured, actually, and we've done this since the beginning. We just basically start creating a document where we ask every team a few questions, and then they decide who and how they answer those. And based on those data and insights, we ask the whole company to submit beliefs and bets. So basically beliefs about our the future, the world, the company, the competitors, our users, whatever, the company, anything. And then we ask them, the beliefs about that, and then so what? What's the bet? What should we do? And most of the time when we do this, I remember, I think last time we did it, we got a few hundred beliefs and bets from and it can be anything from, I believe the future of software is X, Y, Z. But it can also be like, we should have a ritual that is this, or so it's very high and low. And then based on those beliefs and bets and insights, we then set our strategy. And then from that strategy, we create our missions. So we take the whole organization. Every 6 months, we throw it up in the air, and then we bring it back to these mission buckets. So in a way, you could also see it as like you have a new job basically every 6 months. And this we created based on a belief that you shouldn't shape your strategy based on the org. You should do the other way around. You should shape your org based on the strategy, because otherwise you end up in these local maximums where you say, oh, Christian really wants to do this thing, so then he should do that. But that might not be the most important thing that the company should do. So that was the strong belief that we shaped this rhythm on.
How has that evolved as the company grew from a small team of 20 to more and more hundreds?
So the structure of the DIBS is exactly the same, I would say. I would say maybe there are a few more like static elements, that we take into account. But I think the uniqueness of it, like the fact that we take a lot of folks actually change teams, they change what they're doing completely every 6 months. That hasn't changed. So you can look at so many Sanians, as we call the Sana employees. You can look at some of them and go through 8 different teams throughout their time. So that, I think that is so like deeply ingrained in how we do things, so that it's become almost normal for us. But yeah, like some things have become a little bit more like static, or we aren't maybe as like aggressive throwing everything up in the air anymore. But when we started this, we were 20 people. We didn't have many customers. We didn't have anything that like held us to anything, so to say.
To now just close the loop on opening a new market. If you would now give your younger self, who's back then in London, task with, hey, let's open the UK market for Sana. If you would give that younger self like one advice, what would it be?
The thing we did wrong, and I wouldn't do over again, is we had never hired leaders into Sana almost. We've always hired ICs that grew into leaders. For some reason, when we came into these new markets, we told ourselves that, oh, maybe we should hire leaders into them instead of growing them from within. And I wouldn't do that again. And we're not doing that again now for other markets. I think the way I would do it now is I would take a core team from an existing market that's working well, like 3 or 5 people. I would ship them over, ask them to stay for 1-2 years or so, or longer if they want, of course, and just ask them to build it out. And we did this to some extent, but I think we also thought that we bring one person over who can be there for 6 months, just set up the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and then they can back off. That was not correct. And the reason why it doesn't work is, one is because we stepped away from our grow leaders from within, which is one of our strongest principles. The second reason was that the reason why it doesn't work is because culture exists in one place, it doesn't mean that it's automatically going to replicate into another one if you don't have any of the common pieces. You can shape it with the same rituals and the same language, and you try to hire right and so on. But like core of transferring what it means to do Sana or be a Sanian on the day to day, that doesn't transfer just because you're in a video call every day together, let's say. So yeah, I have a fairly clear idea what I would do if I did it all over again. And then, of course, the cliche, we would run into so many different problems, right? You never get away from challenges. Yeah.
Now, in the preparation call we had before, you told me that you guys have a philosophy on hiring, which is that you only hire generalists. Can you dive deeper in that? What's your take on that philosophy?
Yeah, I think we probably ran the most extreme version of this. So I think it's important, depending on how extreme one is, but it might be important to take with a little bit of a grain of salt. But we really believe that it is the same thing almost like running any type of problem. And in the beginning, you're in an early stage, you basically, I mentioned it before, but you're constantly searching for like global maximum, right? And I believe that specialists risk, it's not certain, but they risk pushing you toward a local maximum because they're going to optimize for what they already know. And they're going to like reframe the problem to fit what they already know how to solve. So, and this is normal. It's like path of least resistance, right? So if you get a problem, you're going to say, oh, where does that fit into all of the times I've solved this problem before? And then you're going to jump to a conclusion. And I think, so that's the one point. And then the second one is almost what I came back to earlier, is like, it's a deeper risk that the strategy becomes whatever specialized skills you already have in the company. So I can run like a very simple example of this is, okay, you have an enterprise sales team. And then of course your strategy is going to be, we're going to go upmarket, we're going to sell enterprise, even if that is not your strategy. So, but there are like 1,000 examples. This is just one. Yeah, that's why that was our bet from the beginning. We just said we know basically what company we're running and what we're building for, and we know what we want this company to look like in 2, 5, 10 years, 20 years, but we don't know exactly what we're going to build. So then why would we hire a bunch of specialized skills? And back to this point that took a little bit of a detour, but back to the point of we found that running any function or any sub-problem is basically the same. You find the North Star, you build a machine, you remove the friction, and then you do that over and over again. And we want people to just jump around and solve the biggest problems we have all the time and not be like stuck in their own thing. However, I will say we've hired great specialists as well. We've just asked them to do generalist things. I would always say to people out loud when I'm in an interview with a very strong specialist, I would say, are you ready to unlearn everything you know and to relearn it? And a lot of people are. That's also the beauty of it, right? A lot of people are curious to just become a polymath and unlearn and relearn things.
How do you identify these people in the interview process?
We would look for people who previously have solved very different or very difficult problems and who have been almost like obsessed with the most difficult problems and not like domain. So we believe if you constantly just look for the hardest problems there are and you navigate towards, that's like a person who would very likely be obsessed with Sana and be able to contribute a lot.
And I guess because if we connect this with AI now, right, my take would be that generalists are then better placed with AI, or specialists with a generalist mindset leveraged by AI to work in an organization. So how are you deploying AI now in your corporation generally, internally and not in the product itself?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, so first on your statement on like the generalist being able to leverage AI, and just like anybody, right? I have no idea what the world will look like in 2 years. And I think for me, there are like two opposing like forces when I'm thinking about how an organization will be built or it will run in, let's say, 6 months, 1 year or so. One is like, I believe that the thesis about generalists get only stronger. So with AI, like everyone's a polymath, a generalist with AI can basically execute like a specialist used to. And we've all experienced this to some extent. But also it means that like through everybody leveraging the same models for execution, you can never reach like a competitive advantage solely by being a generalist who like deploy or leverage Claude. And so basically, like, of course, knowledge work is about to be commoditized. And if you only follow Claude, you end up in like identical solutions to everybody else. So, and this will be true for both generalists and specialists. So they just hit in different ways. Specialists can maybe find more leverage with this, and generalists can have like better judgment and use that to then solve bigger problems. But I think what was fun, I take a detour to answer your question, but I'm getting there now. But I think what was very fun with Sana and the way we built and are still building is we had this very generalist, the idea of like, you're a generalist builder, anything that you don't get specific leverage from using your brain, you should automate, outsource, or delegate. And that has proven a very good foundation for using AI because we had already done that work. Our principle was always, Christian, if you don't get like specific leverage, or if you are not uniquely needed to do this task, you should not do it. And that's basically like the principle that most companies now run when they are deploying these AI tools. So we had always the idea of we outsourced the right things. We automated a lot way before AI as well. And we eliminated a lot of work. I think that's also key here. Like, with these tools now and the way we had worked before, saying you should only do things that you are uniquely positioned to do, you also eliminate a lot of things. You just say, okay, but then should I automate this? And then often you get to your head, it's like, oh, maybe I can automate it, or I could just eliminate this work in full.
Yeah, and I think what I found interesting is what you said. It's almost there is a fine line between what is your own understanding based on observations you have in the world and maybe data and feedback you gather with help of an AI, and then you reason about it and it becomes a belief, a bet on the future, versus I'm just gonna aggregate the data points with AI and ask it to derive what I should do, right? There is a line, and you somehow, like somewhere in that process, you need to have an understanding coming from your own, because this is where you make the bet, which gives you a chance to be an outlier and not average, because you have to be non-average in a positive sense to beat the market.
And I think the question is exactly that, like what will be the competitive, what will be the edge basically of a person or a company, and like of any company or person compared to another. And a lot of people bet that will be like judgment or taste or craft, right? And a lot of people bet that would be like defining a problem and so on. I don't know. I think all of them are possibilities.
Yeah. Now, September 16th last year, 2025, you guys made an announcement about your acquisition by Workday. In that time between when you joined Sana for the first time and then really that announcement, and you guys are now operating with more than 350 employees, when was a time, if there was a time, where you thought, okay, we are not a startup anymore, we are something different?
So I would always see our journey as like it was never binary in any sense. I always saw Sana as like eras. So we were a specific company, we were in 20 people and 50 and 100 and so on. So to me, it was always just like a very natural evolution of what we did. I think, and people would always ask, oh, what about our culture? Should we never give up or what's on? And I always thought it was like almost the wrong way of being like, oh, we aren't this, but we are this. And it's just literally, we build a new company almost every 2 weeks. Having said that, yeah, I don't think it was like this binary thing of like, we are a startup or we're not a startup. The one moment I can remember was like when you no longer know everybody's name and on the top of your head, and like I know everything about them. Like we came from a very extreme, right? We would always spend time with everybody and their families and the partners and travel together and all of that. So you knew each other so well. And then of course that's hard to keep up when you're under 350 people. And then eventually one day you walk into, especially another office where you don't spend a lot of time, you don't know everybody's name. And that's probably the most, it probably is the one that like hits the hardest.
And so now across all these different offices around the globe and with more than 350 people in the company, it gets harder to put things on a whiteboard in a room. You still can, but sometimes you have to reach people across different offices. So what are your kind of guidelines to keep the culture as it's supposed to be now that you're so many people?
Yeah. I used to say every single Sanian who joins is responsible for changing Sana and building the Sana that they want to see. So I think that is a very different feeling to joining a company where it's like, this is the culture and now you have to uphold it. And like, even if you didn't create that culture, now it's like, it's not your job. And I think that's a very stressful and strange thing to jump into. I think it's much more empowering for a new team to know that it's like, you are now responsible for taking this the direction that you want. And I used to tell people in their first week, I tell them that every single thing, when I look at Sana, every single thing I see, whether it's a part of the product, it's a process, it's a culture piece, it's a saying, whatever it might be, I remember who that came from. And I remember every single piece of Sana, I remember who built it. And I know for the first hundreds people, I would know. I remember the pre and post of that person joined. So I want to see things become different. If you join the company, Christian, I would expect you to change it. That's the expectation. So yeah, it's a very different framing to what are the things that we need to keep. And I find it much more empowering, and I find it much more fun to operate within, because people also do crazy stuff. But people come in with ideas that they would probably never do if they didn't feel that principle.
Yeah, interesting. Now, in terms of the announcement with Workday and then the kind of months afterwards, were there specific challenges in terms of keeping that culture which you faced internally after doing that communication?
Yeah, for sure. So we went from a 350 person startup to a 24,000 public company. And even we're operating as a startup within this context, I acknowledge and appreciate that's not an era for everyone. And some of the best people I worked with at Sana, I knew when we were going to announce this that they would not necessarily love this chapter, or like not even the day to day and like the actuals, but maybe not the idea of it. And it's not because the chapter is bad or it's just because they signed up for a different game. So it is like it comes with incredible things. And of course, it has a bunch of trade-offs. And I think the hardest thing is that narrative of we're building something on our own, completely uncompromised, based on our own principles. And it's quite easy to build a company narrative based on that and based on being the underdog.
Now, one of our themes at the podcast is, or basically our theme at the podcast is how to scale a business from Europe while staying sane. Staying sane because obviously it's a tough place to be and it's a tough journey, which you guys did. So what's your guardrail or recipe for keeping a long-term balance in work life or a harmonious setup there?
Yeah, and do you mean me personally or how we deal with Sana?
Personally, I would be very interested. And if you have specific kind of embedments in Sana, that would be nice to know as well.
Yeah. I don't know that I'm very sane, so I'm not sure if this is the right person to answer this. But I really love what I do, and I've loved what I do for beyond 5 years back, but especially 5 years back. And for me, I've decided like I personally want what I'm building and my like job, in lack of better words, to be a very big part, an important part of my life. And I'm never ignoring that or pretending that it's not. So I truly feel like building a company is one of the most significant positive impacts you can have on other people. And I don't mean that through the product or like changing the world. I mean it like only every single person who comes there every day to do what they're doing. And that motivates me a lot to just like basically make a mark in every person's life. So that's like big enough and important enough for me to let that be a huge part of who I am. And I have a bunch of things personally that help me stay sane or keep me energized in both work and home. But I think the big thing is like if I'm doing what I love, and there's no way I'm not going to be like ecstatic and energized in the weekend and whatever it might be. But I run a lot. I do a bunch of things that I love. I have a lot of friends who don't do similar things, which also helps you realize sometimes, even if you think something is the biggest thing in the world, and then you speak to them, you're like, oh yeah, they don't even know what this word means. And I love that. So that's one. And then at Sana, what we do is I try to acknowledge and appreciate that this is very individual. So I think there are certain blanket things you can do. I think it's mainly about the culture of curiosity and like kindness and humility, and like the fact that I want Sana to be a place where you walk in on a Sunday morning and like people have done crazy things over the weekend and you can hear about it and so on. And I think, yeah, so it's more very deeply ingrained in the culture more than having, but we have of course a few specific tools for it too. But I think for me, it's deeper than that. It's like curiosity for each other. It's kindness, like knowing that People are always going through things that you can't see and so on.
Now, last section before we close off, the rapid fire questions section. So I'm just going to ask you 3 short questions and you can answer with whatever comes to your mind. The Sana leadership principle you reach for most often?
I would say defy gravity. It's basically assuming everything would become mediocre if you don't fight it each and every day. And that inspires me. Sorry, this is rapid fire. This probably should be shorter. But this inspires me very on a personal level too. That it's like things will not. Life is interesting in itself, but it will not do it all for you, right? You have to fight the mediocrity. And at Sana, I think that's something that really deeply motivates people.
The European city most underrated for building an AI company?
I don't know if you want me to say Zurich, but I would probably say Stockholm.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know if it's underrated, but it's a very fun city to be in.
Yeah. The one product you wish Sana had built 3 years earlier?
I remember when we started leveraging OpenAI's models, and this was way before Gen AI, and we created basically course material based on a prompt. I will never forget people's reactions to that. Like their jaw drop. Imagine you get to demo basically ChatGPT, pre-ChatGPT. That was incredible. I don't think the market wasn't very ready for it because most people would go, "Oh, did you prepare this beforehand?" It was like, "No, I wrote it now." But I don't know if this answers the question, but that's just one thing I will never ever forget.
Last question, Olivia. So if people want to learn more about Sana or you and your journey, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm always available on LinkedIn. I love hearing how other people build, and if there is a specific topic you want me to talk more about, I'm very happy to hear about it, and I will do my best in making something up.
Thank you very much for joining and for giving us some insights into that very inspiring journey, and hope to see you soon again.
Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you. Bye. And this was another episode of our Follow the Gradient podcast.
And now we would love to hear from you. How did you like it? What should we improve? Do you have any suggestions, ideas, or dream podcast guests? Please let us know.
Thank you and see you again next week.